Well, I just did a quick scan and it looks like most everyone is here. I thought because we do have some information for the public that we could go ahead and start, unless if any of the project team thinks we should delay. Hearing nothing, I will proceed. Well, thank you. First of all, a warm welcome to all of our community advisory group members. Thank you for being here, and again for your volunteer work that supports this important project. I also want to just thank the people from the public who are watching via YouTube. It matters that you're being a part of our discussions and that you care about how this program takes place going forward. So thank you for joining us. At this point, I'd like to ask Lisa Keohokalole Schauer to walk us through the webinar and public comment details. Lisa?
Thank you, Lynn. Welcome, everyone. We want to make sure that this is easy for you to be able to participate in our meeting and provide input, whether you are a community advisory group member or a member of the public. We're offering closed captions in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and on YouTube. And users can follow the link to view English and Spanish caption in a separate browser window. Next slide. How to access the closed captioning if you're a member of the advisory group would be to look at the bottom middle of your screen. You should see a menu of options, and if you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen and then click on the CC icon, and a separate window with captions will appear. If you are watching from YouTube, those captions should already appear automatically for you. Next slide. So webinar participation tips. As I mentioned and Lynn mentioned, we are really pleased to have everyone here. We'd like for everyone to be able to either join audio or by either phone or computer, but not both. We really do encourage you, when you can, to turn on your video. We have a large group of program staff members that are on the call today, so you might see some other faces that have their video off for right now. They'll play a role later in our time together. But if you are a community advisory group member, we'd love to see your face so that as much as possible, we're able to interact and participate together. If you could keep your audio on mute when you're not speaking, that way we don't hear some of the real life that happens in all of our households. I just had to have the dog leave the room just in case we heard a bark. So I know various other folks have some of those background distractions as well. And so if you could mute yourself, we'd really appreciate it. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, you can shoot us an email. And I believe that a phone number has already been sent out so that you can call and actually get someone on the other line. Brent, who has his hand raised.
Yep. Lisa, just want to say thank you to those who are participating. We do have 3 members of the public who have joined a little early via video. And so we are going to remove them from the meeting and have them join via the YouTube links. So we appreciate their engagement, but we're having the public join via YouTube right now and not via Zoom. That will come at the end for the public comment, like Lisa will state here.
Great, thank you, Brent. Next slide. Our public input is a little different. And so we want to make sure that this is clear. So you'll see 2 slides. Again, these 2 slides will show up in our presentation later on, but I want to go ahead and explain what's a bit different in terms of being able to share your thoughts. So public comment, brief public comment, will occur around 5:45 p.m. this evening. And in order to provide public comment, we need you to dial in by phone using the phone number 1-669-900-6833. I'm going to repeat the number one more time. 1-669-900-6833. Once you've called that number, our meeting ID is 993. 5459-6043. Passcode is 674942. When you're ready to raise your hand, you'll just hit *9, and after you're invited to speak, you'll dial *6 to unmute yourself. That's a lot of directions in a very short amount of time. We will repeat these directions as we get closer to public comment. But for those of you that are ready and already anticipating sharing some thoughts, this will be the way that you do it, is dialing into 669-900-6833. Those directions should also be on the YouTube channel, and we'll repeat them right before we start to open up public comment. Next slide. We also want to make sure that the public knows how to reach the community advisory group. We do send out public comments that are addressed to the community advisory group prior to the meeting. So any insights that we receive from our community that is directed at our community advisory group 48 hours in advance and is put in an email that says CAG public comment is passed directly on to our community advisory group. And those comments are also included in the meeting summary once we post that after the meeting. So just a heads up that if you are interested in communicating with the community advisory group, this is the way in which to do so. Please label your emails with CAG public comment. Next slide. So today's agenda. We are going to use our time together to really focus on a bit of a workshop to dive deeper into the program's purpose and need and community vision and values. So there's some things that we've been talking about wanting to make sure that we cover, like for instance, the operating norms that we talked about at our last meeting, which was just 2 weeks ago, and an initial charter for how we'll work together. We have found there is so much information that we want to present and not enough time to do it to allow for good, meaningful dialogue. So what we have done is we've taken the draft charter and operating norms off of our agenda today. We also want to send it out with time for you to be able to review that and provide feedback so that you're ready. In order to make that happen, we needed a little bit more time. So anticipate that that'll be in a future meeting. We did send to you the question. We are getting questions from members of the advisory group. We want to be responsive. Our intent is to be able to send you all of that ahead of time so that we can utilize our time together to really get into the content. And certainly if you have follow-up questions or you had a comment that there wasn't enough time to share, please feel free to reach out either directly to Johnell or myself or through the program. Okay, so the next slide is about meeting outcomes. What I want to talk about in terms of meeting outcomes is that we are excited to be rolling this meeting through a bit of a choose your own adventure. So we are prepared to talk about lots of different things relative to purpose and need and vision and values. We're going to do some audience participation where we're going to have a Zoom poll that'll come up, and then we'll have you select what resonates most with you, and then the program will adapt to be able to focus on those areas. So we have some really talented folks on the team that are ready to talk about everything, and we want to focus a little bit more on maybe the top 2 things that might be most important to you so that we can get some real good dialogue with you. We're going to do a breakout session, and within that breakout session, we want to be able to ensure all of the voices have the opportunity to share their insight. With a group this large, it is difficult to have just an open conversation and ensure that everyone has an opportunity to participate. So that is part of our strategy today, is to do a bit of participation through a poll and then also the breakout session. Our meeting outcomes include develop an understanding of previous planning efforts relative to purpose and need and the community vision and value statement, to provide input, as well as identify and talk about what might be missing from previous purpose and need and community vision and value statements. So we have a lot to cover today, but we hope that you'll hear less from us and a little bit more from each other as it relates to these really critical elements of the program as it's moving forward. So I think at this point, the next slide is a little bit about our decision making and our program framework. And Johnell's going to step in here.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, committee. Once again, Johnell Bell, co-facilitator for the program, as well as the Chief Equity Officer. Thanks again for making the time this afternoon. And just a reminder, if you have questions throughout, feel free to either show your cards or use the hand raise feature, and we will try to integrate as much Q&A as we possibly can. At each meeting, our goal is to provide for you an update on what's happening with some of the other committees. As you'll recall from this graphic, there's an equity advisory group. You are, of course, the community advisory group. There's an executive steering group, and then, of course, the other decision-making sort of bodies. And so we want to make sure that we are providing that connectivity for you as we kind of embark on our work together. Next slide, please. Quick update on the Equity Advisory Group, which met last Monday. The focus of the work right now is really developing a program-specific definition of equity. And the basis of that definition is first taking a look at the region, how the region is really defining equity, of course, around the jurisdictional table. All of the project's partners are all of the critical agencies who have been doing a lot of work on the equity front. And so we want to kind of learn from what some of the partners have been doing relative to equity as a baseline. The next step will be developing an equity framework. This is sort of a lens, if you will, an equity lens that will have the equity definition as a foundation to really help guide the program decision-making in a way that centers equity. We are talking a lot these next several months around purpose and need, but we also have to think about the project beyond the NEPA process all the way throughout construction. And the equity framework will be helpful to have us continually check in to make sure that we're developing this project in a way that's responsive to our whole community. As I indicated, the framework as well as the definition will help to inform purpose and need, community vision and values as it relates to our communities of concern. Would invite you to attend or view, of course, any of the upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is on March 8th, 5:30 to 7:30, and then March 29th, 5:30 to 7:30. Next slide. As you'll note, with respect to the executive steering group, and just a reminder, the ESG, as it's referred to by project, is essentially all of the partners, the agency partners, leadership, the principals of those partners, of those agencies, and they meet on a monthly basis. January 20th, they reviewed both the CAG as well as the EAG membership process and provided full consensus support to endorse the CAG membership. Just a note to thank all of you for participating in that process. We're so thrilled with the great body that we have here, and the ESG was very thrilled as well. Developed an understanding of approach for updating purpose and need and establishing community vision and values. And then at the meeting on February 17th, we had a great presentation by our great co-chairs, Lynn and Ed, where they shared information on some of the work that you all have been working on. We received information on the EAG and community engagement activities. And again, more focused conversation on purpose and need relative to what's changed in purpose and need. Next slide, please. Upcoming meeting on March 17th, the committee will receive information on feedback from recent community engagement activities. As we all know, we are right in the midst of really in-depth community engagement activities. And I want to thank all of you for not only sending out the survey, but also filling that out. So thank you for that. As well as review and discuss draft language for purpose and need and community vision and values, including input that they'll receive from all of you at today's meeting, as well as the EAG. Next slide, please. So now it is my pleasure to introduce both Chris Regan as well as Angela Finley, who are our environmental program team, to really lead us through a conversation around purpose and need, community vision and values. And just want to encourage you, if there are some topics that aren't quite making sense, or if you need clarifying information, feel free to use the raised hand feature. We'll try to call on you throughout. We realize this is very technical information. So with that, Chris and Angela.
Thanks, Johnell. Really appreciate it. Hi, my name is Chris Regan, Environmental Manager for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. So wonderful to see you all. It reminds me of a Saturday not so long since past. It's wonderful to see you again a little bit later in the day. Johnell, Lisa, I'd love some help. If you do see hands up, please stop me. I might not be able to pay as close attention. We are about to jump into some of the heavy lifting that we typically do in our environmental processes. The National Environmental Policy Act is the foundations of what we do in our environmental process through the National Environmental Policy Act is to develop purpose and need and community vision and values. In this case, we're going to look at and update a purpose and need to develop a Columbia River crossing and an interstate bridge replacement, and then define some of those community visions and values. Next slide, please. So what we want to do is just give you a general idea. Again, I spoke to you on Saturday, if everybody remembers and has their notes out, wonderful, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail again, just to frame it. Why are we focused on purpose and need and vision and values? We're going to talk specifically about the program needs, do a deeper dive into community values. We'll come back and do a report out and then talk about what's next. Because there's a number of these, as Lisa said, we're going to get in and really find out which ones really resonate with you. Where do you want to take that deeper dive so that we can have meaningful conversations and share as a group? Next slide, please. So the framework. Next slide. Within the National Environmental Policy Act, a project is required to solve a specific purpose, and that purpose is stated in our environmental documents. It needs to concisely identify what the proposed action is intended to accomplish, and it needs to be stated broadly enough so that more than one solution can be considered. This is really the setup, the frame for getting us to alternatives. Our needs are explaining why the proposed action has been undertaken, and it identifies existing or expected future problems within a defined area. These are your problem statements. And these problem statements for our state DOTs are specific to transportation problems. So we would ask, or you would help answer a question, we undertake the interstate bridge replacement to fix this problem. That's how we frame it. That's how we look at it. And as you think about what could the bridge help us solve, you might think really broadly, but when it comes to these transportation, we look specific to those transportation problems and frame it that way. And there was a lot of work that was done in previous planning efforts that identified 6 problem statements, and we're going to take a little bit more of a look at that. Next slide, please. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the community vision and values. The community vision and values guide program development. So the purpose and need is a kind of a pass-fail for whether or not an alternative addresses this underlying purpose and the problems that are out there. The community vision and values help set up criteria to get a little bit deeper and set up differences between components of alternatives so that you can make a choice going forward, figuring out how to solve the specific issue that's in front of you. So community vision and values is really that foundation for developing criteria and performance measures to evaluate those alternatives. The criteria are lined up against each other to determine which alternative satisfies which criteria. And so for example, one alternative may be better than another one with bike or pedestrian access. It allows us the program to see which one does what to make those informed decisions. Next slide, please. So here's an example of how we would use the purpose and need statement as a pass-fail evaluation criteria. We would define specific components and look at whether or not they meet those components. And at a minimum, reasonable alternatives that address those programs' problems would move forward, and the ones that don't would not be considered further. In this graph, replacement bridge downstream mid-level, replacement bridge upstream mid-level, replacement bridge downstream high-level, replacement bridge upstream high-level are your row inputs. And then on your columns, increased vehicular capacity or decreased vehicular demand, improved transit performance, mobility, improved safety, improved bicycle and pedestrian mobility, reduced seismic risk of the I-5 river crossing, and overall. So as you can see on this graph, the middle one, improved safety and decreased vulnerability to incidents, was shown that it failed with a replacement bridge downstream at a high level. It failed at a replacement bridge upstream at a high level. Can't get into the specifics. We don't need to know the specifics, just how we would use this to look at the technical transportation problems, the transportation details, and whether or not we can get the outcome that we're looking for. Next slide, please. So using our visions and values to develop alternative screening, they lend us to comparative evaluation criteria. So here, the criteria that we have listed include fish and wildlife, vegetation and wetlands, air quality, energy, hazardous materials, visual impacts, noise, and the different alternatives that we have listed here, EC1, EC2, EC3, or no action, are then rated for how much impact or how much effect do they have on those for those specific criteria. For EC1 in their previous, and again, this is just for illustration, really, that we might have seen more hazardous material impacts or visual impacts. And so we can look at EC1 versus EC2 or others and say, is that a trade-off that we need to consider? How do we consider that? And how do we line these up so that our decision maker can see this information pushing forward to get us to the best possible alternative? Next slide, please. So as I started to say before, what we try to do here as we look at problem statements through the purpose and need, and then also in vision and values, is help us to answer specific questions. So for the purpose and need, what we would say is, we undertake the Interstate Bridge Replacement program to fix this at the site. Our problem statement, our need statement, has to fit in there. You can say, oh, you know, we undertake IBR to fix something broad scale, but you've got to ask yourself, would we build the IBR program to do that? Or is it just generally, we think this needs to get better in the area? So you might not necessarily build a bridge to make something better in the area, but as you're building that bridge, you'll incorporate things that will make the specific outcome that you're looking at, put it to a better place. Similarly, with vision and values, we'll ask ourselves, to uphold our community values, the program must address these things. And when we look at what the program must address and we create an alternative matrix, again, you can see how the different alternatives will play out with all of the different values that we have listed, so that you can make informed decisions between different alternatives. Alternatives that do more would typically do better. Some that address less of them, of course, wouldn't score as high, but we weight them, and you've got to look at all of that together to figure out the best option to go forward. Next slide, please. So with our previous planning efforts, we identified 6 specific needs. And what we want to do here is look at these needs and apply a new eye and say, you know, what's changed and what do we need to do around this? And that's what our transportation our partners have been doing. Johnell described our executive steering group. It's made up of our transportation partners. They're steeped in this. They do this every day. They're helping us look through this, and we're going to show you some of that as we go forward. But our needs that we have defined are seismic vulnerability on the specific bridge. And so we'd say we undertake the IBR program to fix seismic vulnerability. That makes sense of that bridge. Substandard bicycle and pedestrian facilities, growing demand for more public transportation options, safety and vulnerability to incidents, impaired freight movement, and growing travel demand and congestion. These 6 need statements were defined previously, and we're picking them up. We're starting from that, and we're saying what's changed and how might that change the needs for our program. The values that we had include bi-state cooperation, climate change, community engagement, cost effectiveness and financial resources, equity, mobility, reliability, accessibility, congestion reduction and efficiency, modal choice, quality of life, regional economy and freight mobility, safety, and stewardship of the environment and people. This is a lot of information. To be able to go through, we would love to go through every single one of these, but this is just way too much and the specific details are too great. So what we want you to do is take a look at this. Next slide, please.
Hey, Chris, before we go on to the poll, we have a question.
Great,
Mr.
thanks,
Bill
Angela.
Prowse.
Yeah, Chris, those needs that you had on the previous
Can you go back
slide.
one? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, the needs, those aren't in any kind of particular order, are they?
No, they're not. Typically, you don't prioritize needs within an environmental document.
Okay, other than seismic.
If I could just add on, Bill, if you recall when a couple slides ago, there was the chart that showed alternatives and the pass-fail criteria. If an alternative fails on one, it's out. It has to pass all of the needs. So if it fails one or it fails 5 of them, it does not proceed as a reasonable alternative for the program to continue studying.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. And therefore, there's not really a whole bunch of value in prioritizing those needs specifically. Great, thanks.
You bet. So I think we're going to go to the poll next, Chris.
Great.
Real quickly, I see that Tom waved his card. Tom?
Yeah, I was just going to ask then, does that mean in terms of the needs that there is no there's no weighted quality to the different needs? And you know, some needs seem to me that they would have a little more room to maneuver within the range, and other needs are very fundamental.
Yeah, again, as Angela described it, as a pass-fail, there may be some room there, but if you fail to meet that need, you're out. The devil's in the details, but if working through a specific alternative, you show how you've addressed a need, it passes. Working through the details, if you don't do that, then it fails and it falls off.
Yeah.
So then you would say that the flexibility is in the judgment whether it passes or fails, not whether that need is a higher or lower priority.
Go ahead, Angela, you were going to add something.
Yes, I would say yes to that. And we are starting to, once we, in a couple months, when we are have the purpose and need, vision and values finalized, we are going to get into defining the evaluation criteria and what we call the performance measures. We will be defining what that threshold is for a pass fail. And there is some flexibility there in that definition. So you're a couple steps ahead of us, but definitely keep that in your back pocket as we move forward.
We've got a couple other questions too. Tom, and then Michael.
My question is about the needs. Were those put up just as an example? Are those the needs that you think that this committee should approach?
So those are the needs that were identified under the previous planning efforts. And the work that we've been doing.
I want to know if that is germane to this planning effort.
Yeah, perfect. So what we've been doing with our transportation partners is looking at those needs and deciding or determining how much has changed from there. The work that we've done and the work that we're going to share with you today is working from those needs. And so it is absolutely germane to the work that we're doing right now. These are the needs that we're looking at for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program.
I have
and just to say that another way,
problem with that, with those needs.
Okay.
Is this the point to address them or what?
Well, so Angela, why don't you say that a different way, and maybe we're not going to address your concern, but we'll.
Yeah, I would like to continue that conversation to learn a little bit more about your thoughts, Tom. These are problems that were identified in the past planning efforts, as Chris said. They have not been solved today, so they are still out there as needs. Now, if any of those needs have been solved today through other means, then we would consider revising them. We are in an update process right now. That's what we're doing with our partners, as Chris said, and it's why we're engaging this group, is to help us update them, which could mean rewording, adding, subtracting. We are trying to get through a lot today, so we'll take some quick questions, but we do want to move into really focusing on one if we can. So Lisa or Johnell or Lynn or Ed, I'm not sure how this group typically deals with maybe getting into deeper conversations outside of the meeting.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a crack. I think we could probably have one more question. Tom, I think there'll be opportunities to air your concerns as we kind of move through this process. Again, the purpose of this discussion is to hear whether or not there are additions or subtractions that are needed. And so if you don't like anything on this list, then you'll have an opportunity of adding what you think ought to be on the list or subtracting as well. Lisa, did you say there was one additional question?
Yeah, Michael had his hand raised, as does Bill, but I think Michael, if you have some insights you want to share, and then Bill, maybe we can catch up with you. We want to definitely be able to move into the next phase around needs. So Michael?
Yeah, it's very brief. I just would like to ask, I heard Angela say we, and I'm curious if when you say we are going to do something, if you can be specific, that will really be helpful. Like, we are going to look at this in the next few months. Is that the partners? Is it this group? Is it both? It's just, that's all. I'm just trying to understand. That's all.
Thank you. I feel like I'm got caught. I mean the program, and that includes our advisory committees. We are trying to be open and collaborative, and so it's everyone who is connected to the program.
Just real quickly for me, I just wanted to remind the team, this is a national defense highway, and it's critical for national security. It is absolutely the main route north-south for that purpose. So that's a critical need. I remember seeing a convoy come through the reservation just up in North Clark County, and I'm sure they do use those roads, but it's odd hours sometimes when you see them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Al. All right. Brent, are you able to kick us off on our poll And this is a poll that is just looking at the needs. We will tackle the values, vision and values a little bit later in this session. So what we are asking you is, of these 6 needs, if you could help us select your top need that you're most interested in, and that will help us determine which one we're going to dive deeper in just a moment. So I think folks can just maneuver over to the buttons here and pick the one that you're most interested in. I just wanted to clarify on the third one, when we say public transportation, that's also what you might think of as transit, as in TriMet services or C-Tran services.
Angela, would you mind just reading all of these?
Yes, of course.
And yes, it's meant to choose one.
Yes, thank you.
Just one? That's the question.
Yeah, just one. So our question is, which need is most important to you? The first choice is seismic vulnerability. The second one is substandard bicycle and pedestrian facilities. The third choice, growing demand for more public transportation options. The fourth one, safety and vulnerability to incidents. 5, impaired freight movement. And lastly, growing travel demand and congestion. So folks can take a moment, you hit the button, and then Brent, then you hit the submit button at the bottom. Is that how it works?
Yep, make your selection, hit the submit button, and it looks like we don't have anyone really submitting right now, and then 2 jumped in right as I said that. And so if you could get those in, and then once that is done, we'll share the results as well.
Perfect.
I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in the next 10 seconds.
Bill, did you have a follow-up question about the technology with the poll?
Yeah, I seem to have lost the poll, but I did submit, so I hope it does.
Okay, great.
All right. It looks like our top one is growing travel demand and congestion, followed not too far behind by seismic vulnerability. So we will take about the next 15 minutes. We'll start off moving to the detailed slide on growing travel demand and congestion. And if we have time, we will hop back over to seismic vulnerability.
So I just want to clarify. So what that means is you will actually receive the slides that has all of the detailed information about all these other needs. But because this seems to be the one that resonates the most, we're going to spend more time here. So you won't be missing anything. We'll just spend the time going through the first, maybe second need.
Yeah, that's
All right. Chris, do you want to, I kind of jumped in and
you're doing
took
great,
over.
Angela. Go ahead and keep going. You're doing good.
Okay. So let me just reiterate this again. This need came from the prior work, and we have a little bit more detailed description of this growing travel demand and congestion need for the program. I'm going to read through each of these bullets, and then I welcome any questions on how does this resonate for the members here today? Are we hitting the mark in how we describe travel demand and congestion? Are we missing anything? Are we capturing it correctly? So we'd just like to get some feedback from everyone. So let me first just quickly read through these items so you can hear what the program has developed thus far. And I will again reiterate, this is a draft. It's very much a work in progress. So In terms of travel demand and congestion, one of the items is mobility and travel reliability for all users are compromised by congestion, and delay for the traveling public is increasing. Heavy congestion and delay last approximately 10 hours per day, and that is referring to weekday travel. Accidents are more than twice as likely to occur during the peak travel period. So that's talking about the morning congestion hours as well as the afternoon congestion hours. Cut through traffic increases local congestion. So that is folks who are hopping off I-5 to take maybe shortcuts through neighborhoods or hop on Interstate Avenue or hop through downtown Vancouver to avoid heavy congested freeways. Congestion, I got my picture of people in front of that word. Congestion and delay increase vehicle idling, which is contributing to vehicle emissions and greenhouse gases. And lastly, the unreliability of travel times negatively affects access to jobs and community resources. So I think starting to see a few hands pop up. Sorry, was somebody going to say something?
Johnell?
Okay.
And if folks could, again, please use the raise hand feature. It'd be easier for us to see that, or your cards. Just going to take a look and see who have raised their hands.
I think Mr. Sam Kim raised his hand first.
Go ahead, Sam.
All right, great. Okay, so this is a good list. I really appreciate putting this, whoever put this together. I just have a question about the bullet number 3. Accidents are more than twice as likely to occur during peak travel periods. I'm just wondering, is that per vehicle? So, or is that because there's 20 times more cars during peak period that there will be at least double the accident given other periods where there may be, 1/20th the vehicle traffic? The reason why I asked that is because my experience in the Bay Area is that when cars are going really slow or not moving, chance of accident is actually very low. So that's all.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if I have the answer to that question. These are just some of the data that have been collected. And there are, as we have a lot of interchanges in a short distance on I-5 in this area, there's a lot of people getting on and off the freeway, which causes weaving and merging challenges, which I think is a big contributor to some of the accidents that are happening.
Great. I'm going to call on Diana and then Martha.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out the bullet point around congestion and delayed increase vehicle idling. I would just either take that point away or maybe correct it. It's more vehicle miles travel and burning of fossil fuels that increases greenhouse gases much more so than just the congestion idling.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I had a question. These numbers, like you're talking about the delay lasting 10 hours, is that from today or is that from 2004 when the other project developed its needs?
That is for traffic conditions in 2019.
2019, okay. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Jenna.
Thank you. I just thought I would share with the committee that the American Transportation Research Institute annually publishes their list of the 100 top bottlenecks in the nation. And over the last few years, the I-5 Rose Corridor has been in the top 20 list, and the I-5 bridge was just slightly behind it. And the new list came out this morning And the I-5 bridge between Washington and Oregon there has moved up to position number 23 and pushed the Rose Quarter down 2 or 3 slots. So that region continues to be a huge area from a congestion standpoint, which is more than just an inconvenience. It certainly affects freight travel significantly, reliability, and all of those kinds of issues. And so obviously addressing that congestion problem is a top priority for the Oregon Trucking Association. Thank you.
Great. And next we'll have Ron Dolly.
Thank you, it's Ron Dolly. Yeah, so my question, I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but I was wondering if an additional bullet point could be a potential, and I don't know if there's any data on this, increased traffic tickets as people leave the congested area. I mean, I know sometimes I even do this. You'll leave a congested area and then start speeding to kind of catch up or make up for time. I'm wondering if there's any data on that, if there's an increase in tickets or, being pulled over.
That's a great question. We'll have to follow up on that.
Great. Then we'll have, let's see, Bill, and then we'll have Tom.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, one of the thoughts would be maybe a metric around the social impacts and quality of life for the region. When you get home at 7:30 at night, your family time is greatly diminished. So it really, I think that that might be an element. The other thing is, I wonder if there's a metric around traffic fatalities related to congestion. I know, as Sam said, the traffic goes slower, but there's a lot of tension out there too, in the pressures of everyone trying to squeeze through. And so those are a couple thoughts.
This is the other Bill, which I had my hand up and I saw you took my hand down, but just real quick, I want to echo what Janice said, is the growing travel demand and congestion really adds to everything that we're looking at. The freight traffic, the transit, everything gets jammed up because of the growing traffic, and congestion can overarch a lot of the reasons for the need.
Angela, did you capture all of those?
Yes, I'm trying, but I know we have several note takers.
Great. And Bill, not sure why your hand was put down. We actually don't do that. So sorry about that if that occurred. Let's see, we'll have Ashton and then Tom.
Thank you, Johnell. As I'm looking at this, I think that we should also put a bullet point in here about increasing our regional travel options to ease some of that congestion in terms of public transit and other modes of transportation in and around the area and in the region. I think that will also help to ease some of that demand and congestion as well.
Thank you, Ashton. Yeah, I would encourage you, if you have a chance later on, we do have one about limited transportation options is one of the fundamental needs for the project.
And Tom.
I guess I'm looking at this from too far back, but I have concerns with this. If we were to replace that bridge with a 20-lane bridge, what would happen to the traffic on 205, the transportation, the trucks and all especially? And when we're talking about travel from Canada through Mexico, regardless of what you do, that is going to be a bottleneck there. The part about the accidents, I would, living under the bridge, I would tell you, the congestion, it seems like to me it starts about 6 in the morning or 5:30 and goes to about 8:30 by watching the bridge itself. But I ask that about the transportation because it seems like we're setting concrete here and a lot of things. And just like when somebody brought up, one of the public brought up about the tunnel, how that was shot down and poo-pooed and all, but if you read what he put out there, what they're doing in Nevada, you would see that it's for electric cars. I'm concerned that we're building a bridge for the 20th century rather than what it's going to be. General Motors has announced that after 2035, they will build nothing but electric cars. Volkswagen has already gone to that. That is going to change the types of transportation. The next North American trade agreement is going to change the types of transportation coming out of Mexico. And now, I mean, we're making a decision for something that's 80 to 100 years, we're told. Now I understand the Port Authority is going to sell off parts of the port and all. So that's going to eliminate some options. So I have to ask, not only is the transportation going to change on 205, what was the transportation change when the ports closed because of the strikes? How much more freight was put on the roads then? I didn't live here, but I'm told that it was a tremendous amount. And if it is, and one of our goals is to reduce transportation, perhaps we should look with the Port Authority at port capability here somewhere along the river. And it's not just a Portland problem. Perhaps it needs to be farther down or farther up or something, I don't know. But I think I'm bringing this up to this committee. I'm speaking to the committee rather than the executive group, because I think we're making decisions today or for 2019, as we stated, rather than what it's going to be like the year 2100 and what it's going to be like 2035 and what it's going to be like for the children of this area and all who become adults and become parents and grandparents. And I'm just very concerned about this right now. I would like to know what the numbers are for the transportation, what types of transportation this is being planned for, the amount. One of the public people spoke about 1 million vehicles. Well, I certainly don't think that's going to happen. But if we're looking at electric and we're looking at other options, just what are we planning? This one alternative, which concerns me also.
Hey, Tom, maybe just 10 more seconds. We got other folks who want to get in here.
I'm sorry, what?
If you could wrap up in just 10 seconds, we have a few other folks who'd like to offer commentary as well.
Well, I understand that, Johnell, but I think this is very important that we have to go back to the beginning of this. So I'm talking to the community advisory group, but yes, I'll be quiet now, but I think we have some major issues here.
Johnell, if I could jump in real quick. Yeah, Tom, thank you very much for your thoughts on this. One of the things that we're trying to do within the NEPA process, and it's really difficult. The human condition is to jump to solutions, and a lot of what you said were those thoughts that we're going to get to as we define how we're going to screen alternatives and what those alternatives look like. The slide that you have in front of you are those problem statements, and it is those statements of deficiencies. And so conversation around, how do we get those numbers and make sure that those numbers address or help push our thought process forward is absolutely right on point. I think we're going to have a lot more opportunity to talk about this as we advance forward. But right now it's really about talking about those problems and not necessarily talking about solutions.
Okay, we're going to go next to Jana, and then we'll do Martha and Sarah.
Thank you. I have to remember to unmute. So otherwise you just see me going here. I do think that the point that Tom made is valid. We do need to think about the future of transportation. And he talks a lot about electric cars and the changing kind of vehicles that we will see in the next 20 to 30 years. But I would remind the committee that electric vehicles still need asphalt. And in fact, if in fact we're going to move that direction, then there should be less concern about adding more lanes to address the significant amount of congestion we have, because we won't have the greenhouse gas problems. We won't have the other issues surrounding that. So until we move to hovercraft, which maybe is 2100, I think we need to seriously consider about what the bridge looks like, what kind of capacity it's going to have, and plan for the future rather than just replace it as is. So I just want to make a comment about electric vehicles still needing asphalt. So thank you.
I also wanted to sort of second what Tom was talking about in terms of future, because I looked at, you said, so I'm about the math, and I apologize for getting too detailed, but you said there's 135,000 ADT now going over the bridge, two directions, 3 lanes each. If we assume that the same number of vehicles fit into a lane and population increases by the 35% that happened in the last, or is projected to happen in the next 20 years, in 100 years, we're going to need 13 lanes in each direction. And that is just not feasible. So I second Tom's concern about what we're looking at to solve this congestion problem.
Great. We'll have Sarah, and then we'll do Rondali.
I would like to refer back to the slide that we're looking at. I don't think we're quite solutioning yet. We're just sort of describing the problem, I think, is the intent here. I would like to see how many miles of congestion are affected, because it just backs up more and more in Vancouver, all the way up to Ridgefield and Salida. So it would be really interesting to see just the sheer volume of mileage that we're talking about here. It's going to be a lot.
So I actually really appreciate that Tom brought up those issues and those concerns. And I think a practical way to perhaps start addressing that and thinking about it is if it's possible to not only use historical data. So for example, it sounds like the bullet number 2, it's using 2019 data, for example. If we can look at some projections, if we have any forecasting data, not only about population growth, but traffic trends, if we have folks from TriMet or other transportation and transit departments that can help us with what they're forecasting in terms of new lines, new trains. I know that what I've read is that TriMet is looking into more green ways of updating their fleet. What that means might vary, right? I know they have some electric vehicles now. Also, even though electric vehicles do need asphalt, my understanding, and I'm not a mechanic, but my understanding is that electric vehicles charge themselves as you're driving them. I don't know what they do while they're idle. Somebody who knows more than that can answer, but that could be something to think about during a long, you're shaking your head no, Jana, so I assume it's not an issue. Okay, awesome. Yeah, but maybe we can look at some more forecasting data and some more forward-looking data, and that can help address some of the concerns that Tom brought forward, so we can start thinking ahead and not just either in the past or the current state.
Great, we're hearing that concern. We appreciate the emphasis on not just the problems today, but in the future, and that is definitely within the scope of defining needs for the problem. Johnell, maybe I see one more hand up. Maybe this is our last one before, so we save time to get to our next discussion.
Yeah, we'll call on Robin, and I don't know that we'll have time to do another one. We'll probably need to go to vision and values, Angela.
Yep.
So Robin.
Thank you. Has there been any look at avoided economic activity or avoided or delayed economic activity because of the issue, all these issues with the bridge? I think it would be important to put a dollar number, or try to put a dollar number on the impact of all this. I haven't seen that anywhere.
Excellent
Thank you.
point. Yes. Thank you.
Great. Well, that was exactly the kind of feedback that we need to hear in order to strengthen this effort. Angela, Chris, any closing comments on the purpose and need piece before we move on to vision and values?
I really like what Lisa said before this. Please recognize that although we've talked about one, you will get all of these slides, and we do want to hear from you. If you have questions, our team's here to help out. We'll work with Johnell and Lisa as appropriate, but you will have those slides so that you can do a deeper dive into that.
Great.
Great. Yep. Okay. So we are now going to switch over to the community vision and values. And if we go to the next slide, we can recap what those are. And again, similar to the program needs, these values, we started with what came from the prior planning effort. Our partners, our transportation partners, have been helping us reframe and supplement them. Again, everything is in very draft form, and so we're looking for your feedback. We are going to move into another poll, and what we would like is for you to choose your top 2 that you're most interested in, and then we are going to move into breakout groups. But let me first read through each of these values, or actually maybe I'll wait to do that until the poll comes up. There we go, thanks. So again, just so you understand how we talk about the values is to uphold these community values, the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program must address, and then you fill in the blank. So again, pick your top 2 values that are most important to you. Your choices are bi-state cooperation, climate change, cost effectiveness and financial resources, equity, mobility, reliability, accessibility, congestion reduction, and efficiency, modal choice, that's your transportation options, quality of life, regional economy and freight mobility, safety, and lastly, stewardship of the environment and people.
And real quickly, more thoughts. Saw that you had your hand raised. Did you have a question or comment?
She answered my question. Thank you.
Great.
Great. So maybe I think we're ready to go ahead. People can go ahead and click on 2 that resonate heaviest with you, and then submit your answers. And Lisa, maybe you can talk a little bit about our activities in the breakout room.
Sure. So we are going to transition into 4 breakout rooms. And for those of you that participated in the orientation, you're familiar with our Jamboard. So it's like a big whiteboard with Post-it notes, and we're going to try and make sure that we capture all of the feedback. We are going to look for someone who might be willing to be a spokesperson and perhaps share a little bit of takeaways from that session. We want to ensure that the public has an opportunity to hear a little bit about what was discussed there. And then of course, we'll show the Jamboards as well. So there'll be some program staff in each of those sessions, but it looks like we've got the poll results. So I'll let you take it from here, Angela.
Okay, so it looks like, wow, are really differentiating. Of course, the ones that's the most wordiest for me to repeat: mobility, reliability, accessibility, congestion reduction, and efficiency. Looks like it's got almost 60% of the votes. So that's going to be our first one that we'll check in with our small groups with. And let's see, what's the second one? Cost effectiveness and financial resources. Is that right?
That looks to be right. Correct. That's correct. They got 26%.
26. And then I guess after that one would be regional economy. Okay, facilitators, I hope you are, the other three facilitators, you're taking notes, that we're going to start with the mobility one. And then if we have time, we'll move into cost effectiveness and then regional economy. Brent, I guess, whisk us away.
Real quickly for everyone, if you don't go to a breakout room right away, you will be moved to one. We had some people join after the breakout rooms were created, but you should automatically be moved to one. And for our captioner, you can leave and come back to the main session. Thank you.
I would.
Oh. And give me a second, see if I can't get you into a breakout room real quick, everybody.
I liked the idea of a break room. Sorry.
Is anybody there?
Yeah, we're here.
I'm having connectivity issues, and it kicked me out of the. I just barely got into breakout room 4, and it kicked me back out again to here. So now I'm on my phone too. See which one works.
Let me see here. Let's get you logged in.
I think I'm gonna close out on my desktop and see how long my phone battery lasts.
Okay, sounds good.
Great, and I think everyone is back. Thank you for participating in that small group. We heard at the orientation that you really like having opportunities of working with one another in small breakout groups, and so we are working to create more of those opportunities. I'm going to give just a few seconds here to make sure everyone's with us here. I'd see a few more folks populating. So now we have an opportunity to do report outs. Each group will have an opportunity to share a couple of highlights of the rich discussions I'm sure all of you have had in your breakouts. So any volunteers who would like to kick us off?
Team number 4 will go first.
Okay, go for it.
All right, so we looked at the top 2 vote choices. We actually had some interesting discussions. So we agreed that the first one, the top one, it touched all aspects of what we're looking for. That's why it got the top vote, but it seemed like we're trying to cram 5 different values into a single sentence. And that's why it got all the votes, because it tugged at everybody's feelings here. So in order for this to work, we need to be able to break it out into 5 separate values so that a bureaucrat back in Washington, D.C. won't misinterpret, saying that, aha, it doesn't work on this value, even though it's the cram all day, we can separate it out and not get vetoed because it failed to sufficiently meet one of the 5 aspects of this particular statement. How much time do I have? Do I have 30 more minutes?
No, maybe another minute.
Oh my gosh, okay. All right, so we went into accessibility. What does accessibility mean? Accessibility appeal to all of us, but does it mean that it's the greatest good for greatest people, or and damn the rest? Or does it mean that it is 100% everything for everybody? And so we had some really good discussion there, and I don't think we reached any conclusion, but I don't think those are mutually exclusive. And I think, I think we reached, I thought we could get there. Okay, so I only got 30 seconds. I'll move onto the cost effectiveness and financial resources. We picked that because we have to afford it. And we were so happy that the word maintenance and operation was actually in that value, because in so many projects, you build it and then you go away, and then it go, oh my gosh, we have to levy taxes and raise the toll and so forth, so because we can't operate it right now. But we all realized the best bridge is the one that gets built. So it really doesn't matter whether it's beautiful, elegant, modern. If it gets built, that's the bridge we want. Okay, 15 more seconds. So we looked at the basic financial plan, which was based on the last design, and it needs to be benchmarked against other projects. Is it feasible? What are the requirements for nice to have versus must have? And then let's get the multiplier effect. Keep the dollars spent on the bridge in the community. I think that can have a 5 to 10 times, maybe 20 times multiplier effect. And let's plan on congestion pricing to be built in rather than an afterthought, so that we cannot overbuild this bridge, but just to right size it for the next 100 years. I think I'm out of time, but I have more to say. Got 30 more seconds.
Thank you, Sam. That was terrific. Sounds like a very rich discussion. Next group, who would like to volunteer to go next?
Looks like Rhonda Lee has her hand up. That was our group.
Great. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so the first one I'll add is a bullet point somebody mentioned, to add the word safely. So as we're looking at reducing congestion, increasing mobility, et cetera, to make sure we emphasize that we want this done in a manner that is safe. We also discuss one of the longer sentences in the second bullet point has a contradictory value, where we're looking at specifically encouraging the reduction of reliance on single occupancy vehicles, but also decreasing congestion. So we're discussing about how to balance those, and if we can clarify or perhaps even amend the verbiage there. And then somebody also mentioned a question about how will we accommodate for forecasted increased freight. And so that's something also to think about, not only the increased freight, but also anything else that is forecasted that addresses congestion and traffic Let me look. I was looking at my own notes. I forgot there's the Jamboard. Yeah, I think we addressed most of those. Increasing lanes. Yeah, yep, that's the contradictory line. We can talk about cost effectiveness. We have more on that. Yep. So I'll start with the last comment, which was there's a lot of talk about subsidies when it comes to cost effectiveness. And so somebody made a great point about wording things in such a way that even though this will come through with federal, state, and local subsidies, we need to use language that talks about the other alternatives so that people don't feel like they're being burdened by subsidizing this program, and instead think about the cost benefit of not subsidizing it. So I thought that was really good. It was our last comment, but she said it quickly. And then somebody else mentioned that Senator Murray sent a poll asking for infrastructure funding. And to a similar point, it sounds like we discussed that before getting federal funding approved. There's a lot of items that need to be ironed out beforehand. And so we just had some discussion around that. And then last but not least, there was discussion about how there's an invisible cost or a harder to quantify cost of delays. So scheduling and delays, and the longer it takes to build a bridge is really a cost to the environment, a cost to business, a cost to the commuters. And so we don't have a way to quantify it, but that potentially could be something we can add to that language. What is that unquantifiable or yet to be quantified cost? I think I addressed them all, Lisa, or did I miss?
Great job.
Great. Terrific list and a lot of wonderful things to consider there. Who would like to volunteer next? Lynn, go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, it was from group 2 on the first value of mobility. Just a lot of comments that said it was a big value with multiple elements, very broad statement. The group had general agreement that it was supported and it had wide appeal, inclusive of users, of multiple users. There was a desire to add a bullet to this to remove the I-5 bridge from the worst bottleneck list. Suggestion to use forward projections to evaluate and quantify. Would like choices easier to consider. That was more of a managing data. It would have been nice to get the deck ahead of time. And then a lot of words may resonate. All of these values have a lot of words and some more than others. And then to the second value that was chosen, the cost-effective and financial resources, we suggested maybe retitling it and flipping the order, something like effective acquisition and use of financial resources. And I think this aligns with what one of the other groups suggested as well. A question, what is congestion pricing, and is there a disproportionate impact to Clark County residents? Focus on the certainty of financial resources, and that's similar to what the first group said. How will we measure cost effectiveness? And an example was provided about the environmental impact of concrete versus the cost, and immigration of salmon and steelhead impacts during construction, and the cost impacts and mitigation. How will we measure those costs? And then another question, might alternatives be multi-pronged? So we don't need to, do we have to just pick one, or could we pick multiples? I think that was it for the first two.
Great, thank you. And then our final group.
So we were group 1. We spent a lot of time hung up on, we had the longer sentence one, the the congestion and reliability and accessibility one. And we all agreed that we need that, but we also were hung up because modal options seem to be a piece of congestion reduction. And we felt that modal options should actually be a third option on that slide because it is a congestion easing practice, modal options. And then on the financial piece, you know, we all agreed that there should be some equity in there in terms of like who's doing the work. And we put at least a hard, you know, there should be a hard number or percentage of the work should be done by co-bid firms to ensure everybody in the community is working. And please tell me if I missed anything else, because we really got hung up on the first two slides, the longer slide and the modal slide, because we really had to kind of like what Sam is saying, like a lot of that stuff needs to be broken out. And there was a lot of overlap between the two of those choices.
Great. I think everyone went. That's all 4 groups. Thank you so much, committee, for participating. It's a lot of rich material that will go into and really be integrated into this effort. And so with that, Chris and Angela, could you share with the committee sort of what happens next? They just provided all this wonderful feedback and we had this rich discussion. So what happens next?
Yeah, just thank you everybody for taking the time, diving in, and we're going to take this information, use that to update the wording and provide it back to our executive steering group. You will likely, we're going to work hard to make sure that you get to see what we've done with this at your next meeting, March 10th. You know, as we update, we're gonna do what we can to share with you, but this is really providing perspective to our transportation partners as well, so that they understand the community's perspective on these you know, things that are in front of us right now: purpose and need and vision and values. Really appreciate the conversation.
So I want to just make a couple comments before we pass it on to public comment. We tried to create some space for the community advisory group to really start to tackle and talk about 6 needs that were included in the previous planning effort, and then 11 values. So that is a lot of work in a 2-hour time period. We went to breakout sessions, which also doesn't allow our public to be part of that conversation. And so some things that I really want to make sure are heard in this dialogue and for the public to be part of is the slides that were prepared to be able to go over any one of those 17 different points. And we'll provide that to this community advisory group, as well as on the website. This is the time to weigh in and tell us what you think, to ask questions. And that's not certainly just an ask of the advisory group, but of the public. And we really are hoping that you'll find ways to engage with us, either reach out directly or participate in the online open house or the interactive survey. So just wanted to make sure that even though we only pulled out and talked about one of the needs, 2 of the needs, or 1 or 2 of the values, there are many purpose, need statements and vision and value statements that we are looking for your feedback on, not just the 1 or 2 that we talked about today. So with that, I know we're at 11:45. I do see Martha's hand up. Lynn, I'm going to pass it to you to see if you want to take a comment now from the advisory group or come back and go to the public. I'll let you step in at this point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's go ahead and put the slides up and I'll start with that. But Martha, if you wanted to make one quick comment, let's try to do that before we move to public comment.
Yeah, you were talking about wanting us to review the other needs and values we didn't have a chance to look at or talk about today. When do you need our feedback on that?
That's a really good comment. We're looking to be able to reflect the feedback from the community as well as our advisory groups back to you at our next meeting, which is March 10th. So I would say if we could get your feedback sooner rather than later, that would be great. But we recognize there's a huge volume of information we're sending your direction and asking for you to look at, review, and be able to provide thoughts. And so
specific. Then just
specific. We would have, go ahead, sorry.
Just you said as soon as possible, so I just was wondering if you could be a little more specific to a date.
So next week would be ideal.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, Lisa, I was just going to suggest maybe if we could have it within the week. So by next Wednesday, if that's possible.
Thank you.
There's always an opportunity. It's not done on March 10th by any means. So we're definitely in this iterative loop, and we'll be welcoming comments, but would be great to get it, like Lisa said, sooner rather than a month from now.
Thank you. And if we could get the next slide up, please. This is the same, if you recall at the beginning of our meeting, we said we'd put this up again so that those who wish to make public comment have this ability. Again, the phone number is 669-900-6833. You do need the meeting ID, which is 993-5459-6043. And the passcode is 674942. *9 will raise your hand. And then when Lisa calls on you, you will do *6 to unmute yourself. We will be holding speakers to a 2-minute maximum per person. Next slide, please. And I do want to remind people that there are excellent ways to provide input in addition to being on the call. We all receive a packet of information, as was explained in the beginning of the presentation, and this is where you can send public comments to both via email or by telephone. Written comments should explicitly say CAG public comment, CAG public comment. That ensures that they get routed to the proper place so that all of the CAG members receive them. And we are looking at a cutoff of 48 hours prior to the meeting. With that, Lisa, I'll turn it over to you to call on anyone who wishes from the public to make comment.
So we do have a public comment. Last 4 digits of the number 6225. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi there. Do you have some public comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I was watching online and I hadn't gone to public comments. John Lee, Camas, Washington, private citizen. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I would think this committee would benefit from seeing specific numbers on traffic projections that were produced during the previous Columbia River crossing effort. Transportation architect Kevin Peterson looked at all of those numbers and evaluated that for the I-5 corridor, based on the projections at that point in time, by 2040, you would need 7 lanes in each direction across the Columbia River. By 2060, you would need 9 lanes across the Columbia River. And I'm sure the traffic projections have changed, but this is the type of information this committee should look at and consider. Number 2 is the honest question: do you want to build a huge pipe to handle all that traffic on the I-5 corridor, or would you rather split it off? Just like the Interstate 5 traffic was the only transportation component until we built I-205, we now have 2 ways to go. Potentially, I think the citizens would like to see multiple transportation corridors built. Finally, I would like to suggest that the committee be allowed to view and consider the common sense alternative video. It offered multiple ways across the river for bikes, for transit, for pedestrians, for half the price of what was proposed in the previous Columbia River crossing effort. And therefore, getting more crossings for half the price is wonderful value for the taxpayers, and you don't have bikes and transit and pedestrians competing on one structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And pause just a little bit. I know there's a bit of a delay with streaming and then calling in. So I want to just make sure that we don't have other members of the public calling in. While we wait, I do want to just encourage, I mentioned this before, we have an online survey and an online open house that we'd love for you to participate in and to share within your network. Now, that's not the only way that we want to hear from you, as Lynn mentioned. We also want to be able to have some one-on-one. So we want to create some office hours for members of the community advisory group to be able to ask questions, to be able to get some answers. And so we will be following up just to see what might work best for you. These meetings, they go so fast and it just seems like we just need even more time, but we've been so honored with the amount of time that each of you have committed with so many meetings already in our first couple months. So thank you. I'm not seeing any other, I see Tom's hands raised, but I'm not seeing any other public comment, Lynn. So I am gonna pass it over to you.
Could we get that film, the name of that film that the caller was speaking about, Common Sense or something?
The Common Sense video.
Can we, this is Bill Prowse. Can we share the survey external to our own little group, or we put it out on our newsletter for people to access, but I have another organization interested in the project overall. Can I share this information so they can take the survey? And is it a hard deadline on March 1st that it's done?
Yes, and yes. So please share. And yes, we do intend on closing it at the end of the day on March 1st.
Thank you. And then it's an opportunity for my co-chair, Ed Washington, to highlight what's next. Ed, are you? I can't see everybody. Oh, there's Ed. Ed, are you? There you go. Great.
Yeah, I was muted. Well, as we wrap up here, which is going to be very quickly, I would first like to thank my co-chair, the other co-chair, Lynn, for the excellent job that she did today and the work that she put in. And also I would like to thank the public, people from the public that commented. We appreciate that very, very much. And then I just want to do a shout out to all of you, and particularly those of us that had the breakout sessions. For me, it's an eye opener. And I think what it opens up to me, and I hope that we all understand this, and I'm sure we do, that we have a tremendous job in front of us. And we're going to need each other's help to get it done. No single staff person or the staff can't get it by themselves, get it done. But I was so impressed with the people in in the breakout session, how they were thoughtful about working with each other and giving each other the opportunity to have their say and to listen. And I think that that is what is going to get us across the line. And we're not, there's just as many different viewpoints to what we're doing as there are members on the committee. But at some point, we just have to take all those viewpoints. And I hope I try to realize that I'm here for the people, the public. It surely is not about me in any stretch of the imagination. And so I appreciate those that were in the breakout session. I really appreciate your willingness to chat with each other and to present ideas. And thank you so very, very, very much for that. Just a couple of things and wrap up. We're going to have an online open house. It's going to be on February 16th and March 1st. Next CAG meeting is March 10th from 4 to 6 p.m. And the meeting after that is March 24th from 4 to 6 p.m. And I'm so glad that this happened this week, because I'm afraid if we had had this last week, we might all be shut up in our houses from the snowstorm. So the best to all of you. Thank you so very, very much for your time and your efforts and your energy. And let's just keep them coming, because if we do, we will get across the bridge. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Still going. Where's Katie? Katie,
Katie, can